right, guys, welcome back to another edition of Broomball Canada's podcast Between the Pipes. Of course, I'm here with Chad Schneider. How you going? How are you doing, Chad?
Good. Broomball's well underway. It's busy
Awesome.
time. She's
Is it
marathon.
cold out there? Is it cold out there? Because
You know what?
you
It
know.
was really cold. It got to minus 52 out here for a few days. But now, today, -3. We go from minus 52 to -3 in a matter of 4 days is what it was.
Wow.
That's a huge temperature swing. There was some pipes freezing and bursting in buildings, and
oh wow,
it was
the outdoor
quite
rinks must be
chaotic.
thriving though.
They were until it got cold, and now that it's nice, it's warm, they're starting up again. So, but now we're calling for +3 in 4 days.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's something else. It's only in Saskatchewan. Like, welcome.
It's that carbon tax, I tell you.
Yeah.
All right. So the 2024 Super Series was held in Windsor, Ontario earlier this month. Canada was crowned champion in each of the categories, men's, women's, and mixed. Quite a difference from last year. And we beat the States to get that. In this episode, we're going to recap everything that went down in the Can-Am showdown of the best on best talent in North America. So who do we have joining us to talk about this tournament?
Okay, well, from Canada, we got Mr. Kevin Keeley. He was the coach of the Canada women's team at the Super Series, and he's also the coach of the Ontario Rebels women's team at the Ottawa Nationals men's team. And then we also got Grant Dawson, who is a forward and the captain of the USA mixed team, and he's from Minnesota. So,
welcome, guys.
Part of Broomball in the States, Minnesota.
I noticed something missing there from Kevin's bio there. He's also the coach of the Valley Gamblers juvenile boys team. So he definitely gets his time behind the bench, that's for sure.
Few times.
Yeah. Sucker for punishment, hey, Kev, but someone's got to do it.
Yeah, it's all enjoyable.
Yeah, for the love of the game.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, Kev, have you been on the podcast before? Cam and I were having a debate.
No, I haven't been. No.
Like crazy. I would have figured you've been on one. You must have said no a few times then.
No one's. This is the first time they asked. I said yes.
What the heck?
Said yes the first time.
Unbelievable. All right. Well, I don't know if you've watched any of our podcasts, but Cam and I, we always like to start with the same question and end with the same question. So we're going to start with the classic question is, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this wonderful sport of broomball. We'll start with you, Grant.
Sure. I started playing broomball when I got to college. I was a kid who ran cross country, played a little basketball, but those were my sports. I got to school, and that's the way it works in the States. It's intramural sport. And so you pick it up when you get to college if you're not playing in varsity athletics in college. And fell in love with it immediately. Had a group of friends that wanted to keep playing after school, so we started playing in like the St. Paul City outdoor leagues and things like that, which are just bar leagues, rec leagues. And then from there, you want to keep playing more than 12 times a year outdoors or whatever. So you find your way indoors and just got more and more competitive with it over time. And now it's been, 20 years of fun. So that's kind of how I got started. And probably now play 3 to 4 days a week still.
Oh, right on.
Yeah.
Kev, yourself?
Well, I actually started probably very similar to Grant. I actually started in intramurals in college. Didn't play anything before that. I remember going out and no one ever had any broomball shoes in intramurals. So I borrowed a pair from a friend that played and went out and was able to walk around everybody and thought it was the best thing in the world. And then from there came when I moved back home, I started playing in some of our men's leagues here and worked my way up to a couple of tournament teams and then got picked up for nationals and worlds and carried on from there. That was back in the late 80s.
That's so interesting that you say you didn't have shoes in intramurals. We never had shoes in intramurals.
No.
And I just remember that moment. I put shoes on for the first time, and it was like this life-changing moment out there cutting around people. Yeah,
And no one else had shoes, so it was even better.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Kevin, being the coach of the Canadian women's team, you got to have your choice of the cream of the crop from across Canada. How did you choose your cheeries, and how hard was it to create a team atmosphere with players from across the country?
So there was a criteria set out by Broomball Canada that players had to have played at last year's nationals, and then they were to apply to Broomball Canada. I was provided a list of players. There was a ton of players. There was also a lot of players that weren't on it. What I tried to do is my plan was to create 3 competitive lines, but in creating 3 competitive lines was positional. So trying to play power play with one line, you had to have a shooter on the right and the left, the top, and who's at the back door, who's at the net, different positions that way. So I was able to put together 3 lines that actually worked that way for it. There was tons of great players that didn't apply. And there was a bunch of players that couldn't attend that were asked as well. So it was kind of a combination of who could go and then who fit where based on where they played. So it was good. It was good. It was hard to put that together, and it was really right to the last week. Actually, I had one player drop out, had to have a replacement who was ready to go. So I was lucky that way. So it was good. They filled in.
Awesome. How many people do you think you actually said no, and how many people did you have to ask before you got to your final roster?
Oh, that I actually don't think I have a number. There was a number of players that were yes, tentatively based on just the time of year. There was a few players. There was a number of players with the St. Agathe tournament at the same weekend.
Yeah.
So there was a pile of Quebec players that were like, well, we're right there, so they didn't want to travel, or they had other commitments, whatever it happened to be. So I don't know if there was a full number. I can't remember.
Yeah.
It was back in September when I did it. So
when you're picking, Kevin, like obviously you're going off of experience, like you've been at nationals for many years, got to know the players playing, and is that what you're going off of what you know of the players, or is there stats and stuff that you're looking at that was provided?
Well, on our Broomball Canada website, there was stats from last year's nationals. Yep. I did look at other stats. There was a couple players that actually were selected based on some of the stats that I didn't really know them that well. And like one, for an example, was they at nationals they only had 2 points, but they were 2 overtime goals, and they had the assist on the points. And I was like, oh, wait a minute, obviously if they're playing in overtime and they're getting assists, that was the points that they got. So it was like, so some of that stuff, yeah, I looked at the stats, I looked at what they did in the past, how long they played. I think later on, one of the questions, there was top 10 or 12 of the top scorers at nationals last year in selecting. So that's I did use the stats, and then knowing I had a couple players that I was in contact with, talking about other players and where they played and what position and how fast they might be, not knowing everybody. Yeah, to be fair. So I recruited some help in selecting.
Good deal.
Nice.
So awesome. Okay, Grant.
Yeah.
So we know that USA men's and women's were mostly players that play together most of the time, but was it the case for the mixed team also?
Definitely not. The mixed teams, the only games the mixed team has ever played together were the 5 Super Series games. Okay. The team had 2 practices and a video. This basically was our preparation. We were able to get people together twice on the ice, and then I had put together essentially our defensive and offensive schemes in a YouTube video that I sent out privately to the team. And that's how we built our game plan to do the best we could. And, some of that team building stuff that Kevin is talking about, we had the same thing. The night before I was getting on a plane, we had a player drop and we had to replace with a player literally within 12 hours of the flight and stuff. So I can empathize with that battle on just trying to get a group together for sure. And then the game planning was minimal. There's any of the ice times that we get or whatever, we're paying for ourselves. So I felt like it was a big ask to ask people to be on the team and then also pay for their practice time. So we were able to secure a couple free practices and go from there and do the best we could.
Nice. Well, whatever you did seemed to work because you guys, although it was a clean sweep for Canada, you guys took it to 5 games. So it was fun to watch that.
Yeah, I was so proud of the team for being able to do that. A lot of the credit goes to Lisa Bennett, our coach. She and I worked together pretty tirelessly to come up with what we felt would be at least a fighting chance to go into Canada. Every time we go into Canada, we know we're going to have our hands full because of all the depth that we've talked about and the fact that, you guys got kids that are 4 years old starting to play. And so we know that we have our work cut out for us. And it was fun to scheme with her, and she gets a ton of credit for pulling together the strategy on how we at least made it as competitive as we did.
Nice. It was good. So Kevin, Grant was talking about depth there in Canada's potential rosters, but being that we won all 3 divisions this year, what do you think the main difference was from this year compared to last that were we able to get all 3?
Well, I think there's, similar factors on both sides, like who can go and who can attend. Being in Canada, it might have been easier for some of our players to go. I think the other thing was the time of year. I know last year it was in September, and knowing a number of the players that actually went and attended that they hadn't played since April. That was their first time on the ice, was when they got to Minnesota for the year. So some of that, and then I think there's a little more exposure this year in Team Canada. There may have been a few more applicants, so there might have been a little bit more interest. We were in Canada, so it's easier maybe for our players to get there, as opposed to last year, where it was in Minnesota, and the cost, like Grant said, like having them pay to go, and it's harder. So
yeah, definitely for us too. Whenever we have to travel, it's so much harder to get the team you want to assemble because of availability and time of year for sure. Right after the holidays, I think was hard for a lot of the people on our side of the equation too. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think that like being in September the year before and in Minnesota, the travel, the cost, you haven't played, versus you've played for 3 or 4 months, and then not as much travel. I'll say there were, not as much as what you guys would have had maybe in some of the players.
Sure.
Awesome. Okay, so Grant, obviously there's some differences in rules between USA Broomball and Broomball Canada. But one of the biggest ones is the offside, right? You guys play the floating blue line, we have the red lines. How hard is it for you guys to adjust to something like that? And is there anything else you want to bring up about like other adjustments that your team had to make? Like they're not playing it off the net and
yeah, it's a huge factor, red line versus the floating blue. And quite honestly, everybody in the States feels that the floating blue is the better game. We think that it's just more scoring, better, like it sets up the game to be more exciting.
I agree.
So, yeah. And so I think that we're loath to practice red line. We know that we have to prep at some point for a Super Series or Worlds or whatever. And so eventually we do, but we don't spend the amount of time playing red line and having the reps of the game to get ourselves as comfortable as we need to be. The biggest thing is honestly the breakout, because when we have a big neutral zone to work with, we can be pretty creative in how teams break out, and you can use your speed to just fly through that neutral zone and make longer passes. And the whole thing starts a little later. And so really coaching our team about the fact that our breakout now is starting below the dots rather than at the blue or, just before the blue, is a real cultural shift for us. And then, yeah, absolutely. With the stoppages, in the game, every time the ball goes up in the net and stuff like that, honestly, face-offs become such a strategic part of the game. Like if we got dominated in the face-off circle on the mixed side of things, and I noticed it on the men's side too. The the amount of face-off wins that the Canadians are taking from the Americans is depressing to think about, actually. And so, that becomes a part of the game that obviously we would just have to work on more, because it's so much more prevalent in the Canadian game than it is for us in the US.
Yeah, it's a totally different game. I know, like you said, you guys practice with that red line once in a while. For us, we never practice the floating blue line, because the only time we ever do it is like Can-Am or
Syracuse.
So we going into that tournament this weekend, or this past weekend, our first game was against an American team. They went as CNL Excavating. It was full of A players, and they beat us 4-1. They dominated the whole game. They just were able to have fast breakouts, and they had guys behind us. Like, we're sitting on that red line, and there's guys behind us not paying attention that we're not used to. So in that first game against a really strong team that knows how to play that floating blue line, it was tough, and we just couldn't handle it, and we lost. It took the whole weekend to kind of get used to it, and then we were able to beat that same team in the finals. But it's a huge adjustment. It's a totally different game.
Totally different. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, that is something that we certainly struggle with and always have to be cognizant of. The smaller nets aren't honestly that big a deal for us. I don't feel like that's so much of an adjustment. The bigger nets are just more scoring, but I don't feel like that factors into the game results as much as obviously the floating blue does.
And the stoppages of play.
Yeah, stoppages of play.
Honestly, if we're up to me, I'd implement all those changes into the Canadian rules, the keeping it in play off the netting, the bigger nets, and the offsides. It made the game so much faster. Like the game, the way it was played went quicker, and then the movement of the ball, the breakouts. Like I find in Canadian broom ball, we get set up a lot, and it's just working one end, working the other end, working one end, working 100%. The other end. With American broom ball, it's a lot of back and forth. There's less setting up and more breaking out, and it's a faster game. It's more exciting, I find, for the fans to watch. It's different.
Cam, you know what? You can always put forward rule changes when we have rule change years.
I could.
You could. You could.
Let me tell you,
do more talk than action.
I feel like what you guys are doing here is trying to grow the game, and what I have loved to do through broadcasting on Broomball Central and trying to play around the world as many different places as I can is to grow the game. And I feel like if that's what we're about, growing the game is making the game more exciting and evolving those rules to keep the game faster pace. As the technology has changed, we're getting curved brooms and we're getting better sticky shoes and those sorts of things. The game's getting faster, and the way that you can promote and make the game more exciting is to make it faster, to improve scoring and things like that. So I think it's a natural change over time if the sport wants to continue to thrive and grow.
Yeah, agree. But until we see some of those rule changes and stuff come forward at the CBF level, it's status quo.
Sure.
Not saying the executive or the board can't bring stuff forward, but
it starts at this podcast, guys. Let's go.
Well, I'm gonna talk to the head of the snake here, Chad. If there was one rule change you think that would most likely to happen, what do you think that rule change were to be? If I was to send a rule change to the board, has there been any talk behind the scenes of any of these, or is nobody talks?
No, there's no talk of it as of yet behind the scenes. But I mean, at that level, at that AGM, when we talk about those rule changes and stuff, it's the provinces and territories who have the power, right? It's no one that's sitting on the board that really, we can agree or disagree. But first step is getting the FBAO on board and bringing it forward and having their support. And then, then you got to get Saskatchewan broomball behind you, and then you got to get Quebec broomball behind you, and then moving forward that way. So I mean, there is benefits to it. I love it speeds it up, but yet it's hard for change for some, because there is it's the way it's always been done. But not saying that it can't be changed, not saying that at all, but
there's also big implications not only in that game, and I have played both with the floating blue line, but with no body checking. You open it up and you have the better shoes and the better speed and it's faster and you keep body checking. Like I think the game's great for the non-body checking. But at the same time, if you're gonna, you want to have a shorter area so that guys aren't getting, like, people aren't getting hurt, wide open at the one end of the other. So there is I think there's a combination more than just one rule there going. The floating blue, then
100%.
you're taking away the body for sure.
Yeah.
Nope. Agree with you, Kev. Definitely. That's good
Multiple.
points.
So yeah.
Yep. Okay, well,
But
Kev,
as a guy, as a guy
Yep.
who's 5'8" and 165 pounds, I'm fine if you guys get rid of the body check too.
Yeah.
But no, I understand that for sure. Once the game speeds up, yeah, we all have to go to work on Monday, so we want to make sure the game's safe too.
that's right. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, Kevin. So on to you now. Obviously, being a coach of the ladies team and the team that you put together, and then winning it all, was there, someone on your roster, one player, one person you leaned on, or someone that maybe have surprised you and was a great revelation for you at this tournament that you did maybe not have expected, or was like, yep, that's what I thought?
Oh, I mean, it's a good question, but I think it's many
It
factors.
sucks.
It doesn't suck, but it sucks. Great revelation for what? For leadership. There was players there. I had Steph Legault and Chloe Perron who were so good leaders. They took over the room. They helped me a lot because there was some, I'll say, language barrier with a couple of players. So they helped me a lot on that. I had Michelle who had 4 points out of 5 goals. She was fantastic. Jenna James has stole one of the games for sure and was outstanding. Like at different spots and parts of it. All my defense were like solid right across. Like Emily from Quebec, she scored the winning goal in the final game. She was strong. Jasmine Namagoose was a threat every time she went on the ice. It was just like, oh, she's going to score. I mean, there wasn't like at different parts of the tournament. There was times when I was like, okay, it's near the end of the game. Let's, try and shut it down versus let's try and score. But I don't know if there was one. I'll say I was really surprised and pleased with Marianne Phillison from Western Ontario, who she was way better than I ever thought she was. She was a fantastic player. So I'll say a bit of a surprise, a little bit more of a surprise. As far as a revelation, no, not necessarily any one of them, but all of them at the same time. I mean, they came together, they won all the games. They bought into my quick little system after one practice. So it was good. It was good. So
awesome. So I got a question now for both of you. With your own personal predictions before the Super Series, in all 3 categories, did you think they played out the way you predicted? I know for me, I definitely predicted a Canada clean sweep just because of the selection process. It seemed a little bit different this year compared to last year. And looking at the rosters this year compared to last year, it looked like we had a good chance going in. What about you guys? Did you guys go 3 for 3 or 0 for 3? Grant?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to start here. Obviously, we went in with the intentions that we felt like we could be competitive and win. I mean, you don't go up there if you're not going to try to win. I think that I had felt that the men might be more competitive. I think that we were all under the knowledge, like when you go into Canada and you're playing the Canadians, plus we beat you in the first one, you guys are going to be motivated to come and, kick some ass and take some names. So we thought we were definitely getting ready for that. I think the sweep on both the men's and the women's surprised me that it was just 3 and out. I liked that the men came back in game 3 and made it competitive, down 2-0 there at the half, and at least tied it up and forced an overtime and showed a little life and zest. And that was good to see. I thought all of the women's games felt more competitive, fairly back and forth. I thought the Canadian ability to just put a stranglehold on our women's offense was quite an amazing thing to see. It was really good coaching, Kevin, because I always think about some of our American athletes. You look at world stats and things like that they can go and put some goals in. And they were largely kept off the score sheet. So that was impressive. So I was surprised that that was just 3-0, but I wasn't surprised, honestly, that we lost all 3 series. I was delighted, of course, that we went the full 5 games, and, it felt like those 2 teams could just keep going back and forth. If we played a game 6, maybe we win that, and then they win. It just felt like, so mixed really was competitive and felt like 2 fairly evenly matched squads. So yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised that Canada won, but obviously I felt like the mix put up the best fight.
Yeah, it seemed that way for sure.
Yeah.
Kevin, did you think Canada was going to take the clean sweep? Did you guys think you were going to go 3-0?
I never thought that we'd go 3-0. I had some game strategy for game 1. I'm ready to switch it up and plan for anything that came to us, whatever it was. I did see the American roster. I did see them at Worlds. I mean, they were very strong. And like Grant said, there were some very good women on there, but I don't know if they had their full top players there either. I think that's part of like what I was saying earlier. Could everyone attend? I knew they'd be close, and all of them were. Clean sweep. I did see the men's roster, and I mean the Canadian men's roster right off the bat. I saw the top 9 forwards and went, I don't know if there's many better players out there. There's lots of good players, but those 9 were incredible. Being there, watching all the games as well. Their forwards were so strong. Mixed. I think the mixed went the way that it went. As far as prediction wise, going, that's going to be close. I mean, game 5 into overtime could have been very much the American side. We were on our side of the country, so I think we took it there. We'll take the home ice on that win. But I don't know if I predicted 3 straight. I don't think I really looked at that. I more looked at, okay, what are we going to do, especially with the women's team? What are we going to do game 1? Okay, how are we going to adjust? What are we going to have to do? Thankfully, I didn't have to adjust. I had lines changed and everything for game 2, and went, oh, it worked the first time. Let's go at the second time. And I think we just got better and better as we went.
Awesome.
Okay, so as we know, it's only the second time that this Super Series is run, right? So is there anything either one of, I don't know, Grant, were you at the first one as well?
Yeah, I played for the mixed team in the first one.
Yeah. So I guess with that being said, like, is there anything that you still needs to be improved to make the event better? Or, obviously we're probably going to be going back to the States next time and playing some different rules and things like that. But is there anything that either one of you could think of that would make the event even bigger or better than what it is today?
Well, I'm going to nitpick on one thing. I think that the Canadians have to figure out streaming the games a little better. I would say that
Yes.
Trying to get the audience involved and being able to watch it anywhere in the world is
Grant?
something that needs to be improved. So I would say that would be one of the things I'd really work on. It's not so hard to have somebody turn a phone sideways and start talking about the game. So that I think is number one. Is if we're marketing the sport and growing the sport, let's make sure that we get it out to the people who can't be in attendance. And then just selfishly, if we're going to do the Super Series, every other year, America and Canada, then I'd say let's play the American rules in the United States. Let's play the Canadian rules in Canada, and let's get after it. It's so much fun. I mean, I'll try to be involved with it. Well after being a player, I certainly would volunteer or broadcast or coach or do whatever could to do to continue to grow this. I think it's great.
Yeah, being as a fan, that weekend I was playing in the Santa Gath tournament, but between games we were trying to watch the Super Series, and I was ready to throw my shoe at the TV. Just
It was unreal. Yeah, I mean, my phone was blowing up. I do a lot of the broadcasting on the American side for Broomball Central, and I broadcast the final of the last Super Series for Broomball Central and the Men's World Championship and stuff like that. And I enjoy that as a hobby, but my phone was just blowing up all weekend. Why aren't you broadcasting this? Why is the streaming so bad? We want to watch. And, if you've got the few passionate people that love broomball really trying to seek it out and find it and not being able to, that is a problem.
Yeah, hopefully we can find a better system, because there's just so many different ways that people can stream and have streamed. I mean, there's obviously the simple just iPad on a tripod and turning it, but then there's been tournaments where you've had Rogers TV out doing replays and stuff, and that's just so beautiful to see that when you can get that to happen. But at least having some sort of consistency would be nice for future tournaments.
Yeah.
Kevin,
Especially
anything
marquee
to add to that?
tournament, for sure.
Yeah, especially the Super Series, like you said, Grant. Like I totally agree with you, and so appreciate it when you are doing games and I'm not there, so I can watch and you're commentating the games. We really enjoy that. It is great. But there was some technical issues in Windsor for sure, because my phone was lit up as well. My thought on it is really developing like what a Team Canada, what a Team Broomball. I mean, the biggest problem is money, right? We need to get people to the games to play. We want our best to go against their best, and everybody wants to see that. Everybody wants to see, okay, who is your best? Who are your top? So, and my thought in some of it with Team more on the Team Canada side was like our criteria is playing at nationals and creating a Team Canada of 30, 40, 50 players from our nationals created by the coaches that are there, the executive there, and say, well, here's your list. We've just created it. And maybe Chad, I know we have our all-star team and stuff like that, but by saying, here's your Team Canada this year at a nationals or after nationals, based on the coach's input, the executive, and some criteria in there, just to build a bigger pool and get the players more interested in it. Not sure if the Americans could do that or not, but a similar thing. No, I just don't know if that's possible at your nationals. You guys have 60, 70 teams at them, right? So, I mean, can you put together 30, 40 players? Now, who can go out of that pool, right? You guys made Team USA or Team Canada, and creating a bigger pool. I mean, they do it in junior hockey. They do it for the World Championships. They do it for the Olympics. Here's your top 40 guys. Okay, now we'll start breaking it down, or ladies or players, right? So let's start breaking it down into a smaller group after that with the coaching staff or whatever. So it would make it easier. There's more people involved, and there might be a little bit more interest. But I think having a little bit of money on either side, going, okay, well, we want our best to go. We want to play your best. We don't want to play, just players that can go.
Yep.
No, and same thing, both sides. Graham, you'd probably be the same. Going, you don't want that.
Yeah, 100%. Like getting the actual best to play the best is what it's all about, and not the best who is available on such and such a date. Yeah. Of course, it'd be great.
Yeah. I don't know if that had ever happened, but that'd be one way for sure.
Yeah.
I think I like funding. You go back to funding, Kevin. Unless we find sponsorship, unless things like that, it's hard. I mean,
don't get me wrong. I know that.
Especially at us for Broomball Canada, like our funding comes from Sport Canada, right? So, and there it's ear tagged for certain things, right? We can only spend so much on this, and we can only spend so much on that. But if we can start working on somewhere where we can get some sponsorship to do things, but there again, that's people wanting to spend their time knocking down doors and beating down fences.
Oh, no. Yeah.
And
there is money's probably the biggest issue. I'm not saying where it comes from is also part of the issue. So,
but there it comes back again to the marketing. Like if you're streaming the games and you can show, hey, we're watching, there's a viable stream and there's 2,000 people watching this game every time we put it up, then suddenly it's easier to go to a sponsor and say, hey, you're an equipment maker, and by the way, we can get your logo on the broadcast in front of 2,000 people every single time the sponsorship question starts to solve itself when you start reaching out with the marketing. Yeah.
Well, it's nice to hear that you guys only have improvements behind the scenes. So it sounds like the actual on ice and tournament play went well.
Yeah.
That's good to hear, and that's what I've had a lot of friends there that all had a great time. So that's good. That being said, do you guys feel there's a rivalry now that has started between the two countries, that now that it's USA won the first one, Canada's won the second? Do you think you guys are both going to go back hungry to get that rubber match next year or next tournament?
No question, for sure. I feel like for us in the States, my 20 years of playing Broomball, the Canadians have always been the gold standard. We've always kind of looked to the Canadians. You're growing up and you're getting better as a player and you're stick handling and stuff, and somebody's like, well, wait till you go and play the Canadians. And then you do, and you go play in the Syracuse Can-Am, or you play in Worlds or whatever, and you get to see, wow, there's this level of play. And so I feel like the American game has grown in skill at the elite level to where, some of our best players are some of the best players in the world, right in there with the Canadian players are some of the best players in the world. And so I definitely feel like that rivalry is real. And, you look at a world championship game, the last, 2018 and 2022 was an American team versus a Canadian team. And now the Super Series going back and forth. So it does feel like there's a real rivalry there. And it feels like there's also a sort of fraternity. Like nobody seems to really hate each other. It doesn't feel like an unfriendly rivalry, but it feels
Yeah.
competitive for sure, which is great.
I get that vibe too. I don't know. I'm going back to the Syracuse again, but it's a good example where the last 3 or 4 Can-Am tournaments has been a Canadian team versus an American team in the finals.
Yeah.
And even this year we played the Americans again in the finals. And afterwards it's just like, oh, that was great. It's nice to see. I hear from a lot of the Americans that they are the best in their area and they don't have a lot of competition in their area. So they love playing against Canada because it's hard for them. They like that competition. And so they were, after the game, they're like, oh, we have a tournament next year in Ohio or whatever. And they want us to come to that just so they have some competition at that level. So it's nice to hear.
Yeah.
Okay. Kev?
So for me, officially, I am sort of yes, there's a rivalry, but as a real rivalry where you've been battling for years and years against the same team and same players, I don't think it's there yet. I think, like Grant said, like it's like go out and they play as hard as you can, and let's have a beer after, or it's still friendly, which is great. I mean, I've got a lot of friends all over Minnesota through broomball. I've played with the homegrown masters team at the Worlds a couple of years ago, and they only wanted to beat their rivals.
Yeah.
I mean, we actually had a chance to make the top 4 at that Worlds, and guys were like, no, we're not going to play. We're going to sit out. We're going to rest for the next game. And we blew a game because of it, just because they wanted to beat their rivals. And that's where I really see a good rivalry. A lot of teams in my past where it was like some of the teams I played against, the Corkery, we used to, battle every weekend in tournaments, and it was a rivalry to no end, until we started to play together. And then it became, okay, now it's a little more friendly, and those guys are good guys. And I think that's where we're at with broomball. I see the rivalries and teams and the players go against each other and go so hard against each other and go up and have a beer after. And I think that's part of, yes, there's a rivalry there, US, Canada. Of course, everyone wants to beat the US. Why not? That's part of it, right? And from losing 3 straight the last time, yeah, of course, players want to do that. But I still see that as a good thing, but not as strong a rivalry yet of those hard battles. So that's my thought.
Yeah. Hopefully more to come, though.
Yeah. For sure.
And it's like you said, Kev, like we've said on this podcast so many times, like broomball is a close family. It's not a huge sport. It's usually the same players. I know, especially on the Canada side, it's same teams usually going to nationals all the time. And if it's a different team, it's still the same players from the team that was a different team name last year. They're still there. And you still have those connections. You still talk to the same people. It's just a really close-knit community. And you're right. It's nice to see that what stays on the ice is left on the ice, and you can still have a great conversation with that individual after having a beer. So
yeah. And that's the same in the Minnesota culture as well. We play competitive brooms against each other all year round. And it's the same way. You see the same 100 people at every tournament, and you hang out with them between games and after games, and then you just get after it on the ice, which is fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys, what would you say to players or coaches who aren't sure if they want to attend or take part in the next Super Series? Like, how would you word it so that, it's a great tournament and you want to get them there? Like you said, Kevin, like you had players on the fence. They weren't sure. You had people who didn't put their name forward. Like, how do you get those players or even coaches to put their name forward?
Well, for me, I look back to probably many years ago, back in the early 90s when I was first asked to play with Embrun. at a nationals, and we didn't have the money. I didn't have, time off work or anything else. And it was like, you know what? It's an opportunity of a lifetime. It's a chance to take. I mean, since then, I try and throw that at my wife every year. It's like 35 years or whatever it is. It doesn't always work, but sometimes it's a good chance for me to go. But you know what? You only live once. If you're offered an opportunity, you have an opportunity to do it, take it. Make the best of it when you go. Enjoy that, whatever that happens to be. I mean, and that could be with broomball, but for this one here, yeah, I mean, best on best. Like, how many chances you're going to get? We go every second year, and as long as that carries on, you may have a long time, but this could be your last time you ever get asked, or last time you make nationals to qualify for it.
Yeah,
Go
I know
for
we had Gracie LaRue, one of the girls I coach on Thunder. You had asked her to play with the women's team, and she had asked Thomas and I if we thought it was a good idea to go, and I said for sure. It's the best on best. It's could be a once in a lifetime opportunity for you. Go for sure.
Exactly. Yeah.
As long as people see the opportunity that they're being given, it should be a highlight for them. So
Yeah.
I agree. Like, there's not too many times when essentially you get to put your country's colors on and go
Yeah.
represent them. And in the Super Series, it really is that. It's not about club teams. It's not about playing with your buddies. It's literally you've been selected to throw on your country's colors and get after it. And yeah, what better opportunity? I mean, that's a rare gift. Yeah, I can't imagine anybody turning it down.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you guys had fun. Was it your best broomball memory? If not, what is your best broomball memory? The question we always end it with. Kevin, let's start with you. I know you've got lots of memories.
Yeah, I do have lots of memory. I've been very fortunate. When I went through my playing career with some worlds and a few national wins, to coaching at different, men's, women's, kids. I mean, I can think of one game that I played in the 2002 Nationals, and back then it wasn't 3-on-3; it was 4-on-4, no goalies, sudden or total goals, 5 minutes total goals, and we were playing Bruno, and it was 4-4 at the end of regulation in the round robin, and we went 5 minutes of overtime, and it ended 8-7. Mike Papineau scored 7 goals that game. It was just a game memory. I'll say game memory, but probably my best is trying to build and create a new a youth program that I started back in 2010 with kids in the neighborhood, and still have it going 12 or 13 years later. To me, that has it, but I think my top one is winning a nationals with my kids. Like, that's pretty special. I've been fortunate because I've won more than one, so with them.
I was gonna say.
Yeah. Well, the first one's pretty special. I mean, then going on to men's and women's, and I think one year we held the men's and women's national trophies, and I think the men's world trophies. We had them all at our house, and it was like pretty special. And I think a juvenile the same year, like it was a good,
Yeah.
but play, just having my kids there and bringing them up into the sport, and watching them succeed at the levels they're playing now, which is a lot better than I ever was. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I've definitely had some broomball memories against your family. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, being so close, we would. So
Yeah.
Some
Grant, what
heartbreaks.
about yourself?
Well, I'm going to win some points here because my favorite broomball memory, I'll say I met my wife playing broomball. And so it's hard to top that, I got to the rink on a snowy night, and there was a cute girl there that I was passing the ball around with. And now 13 years later, we're still married. So I'm going to say meeting my wife is my favorite broomball memory. I got lots from playing, but that would be number one.
Awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
I've heard lots of love stories. That's the first marriage that I've heard of yet. So yeah, it's awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining us. I've got to get to practice. We're going to do some dry land training, so I'm going to bring my daughter out there too. She'll do some running with the teenage girls.
Cool. Right on.
Alrighty.
Okay, well,
But,
thank you again so much. Thank you for being part of this. Thanks for saying yes, Kevin.
You just
And
had to
Grant-
ask, Chad. You just had to ask.
Yeah, and Grant, thank you so much for
Yeah,
attending. as
Thank you
well.
so much for
Yeah.
having me. Really love the work that you guys are doing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You
Thanks,
guys
Grant.
take care.
Thanks, Chad.
You
Yeah.
bet. See you
Thanks,
soon.
Sam.